Hello everybody, welcome to pilottechnica.com. Today we will talk about the global report format. So let's go to the point. The global report format is the new way how the ICAO globally harmonized the methodology for assessing and reporting runway surface conditions in order to determine the required takeoff and landing distances. This is applicable globally since November 4th, 2021. It has 5 fundamental elements. The first one is the Runway Condition Report. The second one is the Runway Condition Assessment Matrix. The third one is the Runway Condition Code. The fourth one is the standardized definitions of runway surface conditions. And the fifth and the last one is the standardized definition of runway surface condition descriptors. We'll talk about each of them later on. This is the Runway Condition Report, and this is the way how we will interact with the information about the runway surface conditions. In the lower part, we have an example of the XXX airport. It starts with the date and the time of the observation and the runway that is affected. Let's see the explanation. The third part of the report is the Runway Condition Code, and give us a number that represents the surface condition of each third of the runway, the beginning, the middle, and the end. These codes come from the Runway Condition Assessment Matrix, ranging from 0 for a very slippery surface to 6 for a dry surface. This table is used by airport operators to report runway surfaces conditions and clearly identifies factors that influence aircraft takeoff and landing performance, particularly braking performance. The Runway Condition Code should be reported and determined through the assessment of the following criteria: the percentage of coverage of contamination for each third of the runway, the type of contaminant selected from the Runway Condition Assessment Matrix, the depth of contamination, and surface air temperature when applicable. The Runway Condition Code can be used by flight crews to interpret the runway conditions. For example, in this case, the first and the middle part of the runway has a Runway Condition Code 5, equivalent to a runway braking action good, and the last part has a Runway Condition Code 4, equivalent to a runway braking action good to medium. The third part of the report is the percentage of coverage of contaminants. In this example, we can see each runway third is 100% covered by contaminant. Here is the table that the airport operators use to determine the percentage of coverage. If the coverage is more or equal to 10% for at least 1/3 of the runway, we can consider that the runway has a contaminant. So you can see here, if the assessed percent is equal or less than 9, they will report November Romeo or NR, so it's not reported. But if the assessed percent is between 10 and 25%, they will report 25%. If 25% or less area of the runway third is wet or covered by a contaminant, a Runway Condition Code 6 should be reported. Here we have more examples. Let's look at the second one. The second one says that the first third of the runway is 50% covered. Half of the surface is covered. The middle third contaminant coverage is less than 10%, and last third is 25% covered. Quarter of the surface is covered. The last example, it says November Romeo, November Romeo, November Romeo. It means the runway is completely dry. The third part of the report is the depth assessment for contaminants. This will give us the information about the depth in millimeters. Depends on the contaminant. For example, for standing water, 4 millimeters is the minimum depth at above which the depth is reported. For 3 millimeters and below, the runway third is considered wet. But if the contaminant present is, for example, a slush, wet snow, and dry snow, 3 millimeters is the minimum value at above which the depth is reported. So remember, above 4 millimeters for standing water and 3 millimeters for slush, wet snow and dry snow will be reported. Otherwise, you will see November Romeo. The fourth and the last part of the report is the standardized definitions of runway surface conditions like dry, wet, slippery wet, and contaminated runway. We can find as well the surface condition descriptors like compacted snow, dry snow, frost, ice, slush, standing water, wet ice, and wet snow. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching.